Hey! Nearly missed the landing zone there. How are you doing this evening? Think of all the trash we were taught in high school and college and elementary school. Isn't it amazing? The difference between me and the other folks that I went to school with is that I knew it was all trash. I knew right from the get-go. It's like, should I learn something from this teacher? Or should I actually go to the library and pick up a book or two of a few different authors of, what medieval children's, medieval rich people's children were taught. Even Alexander the Great, taught by Aristotle. I keep telling people this, and they don't believe me until they experience it firsthand. There is a shortcut to superior education. Superior. Filling your head with facts does not make a smart person. You're supposed to be able to synthesize things and look at things and see a problem and use the toolbox within your head to work out a solution. The same is true of unification. Nobody uses actual physical maps anymore. We all have our little iPhones and our Androids, and you just speak into it and you tell it where to go, and of course it takes you there. You used to have these neat little fold-out things made out of paper. They're called maps. And in the bottom is this neat little thing called a legend. Yeah? Or a key. And it'd tell you what all the little things meant. It's like the squiggly lines that are blue means water, and this means road, and this means like rest stop. And there's a simple key to the entire basis of the universe. But you're not going to get it from the education system, and you're certainly not getting it by reading any of the books. But I have a PhD in astrophysics. These people preaching things as real that are not real, and saying things that are real in the absolutist sense, or aren't real at all. Isn't that amazing? They reify space and time, which are not things at all. And they'll actually take something which is real, not real in the demonstrable, objective, palpable sense, and that you can look at it and hold it in your hand, such as the ether and the soul. Those things aren't real. It's like, no, the things that actually are real, you keep telling everybody doesn't exist, and the things that don't exist, you tell everybody that they're real. Isn't it interesting? Is that ignorance or evil, or is it a combination of both? Well, it's a combination of both. I'd like to talk about unification. Everybody's always questioning, especially in live stream, the definition of ether. And they only have objective, palpable quantifiers for things they can actually picture in their head, but anything you picture in your head, of course, is objective. None of us, when we're walking around or breathing, which is completely unconscious, think about the air. But as soon as there's a storm brewing and the winds are blowing like 90 miles an hour, and the cows are the cars and the cows are being lifted up, then we're all of a sudden aware of the air. We only notice air disturbances like fog, like, oh, look at that, look at the fog. I know that's actually humidity. But seeing cyclonic, anticyclonic action, heavy winds, which of course are blowing things around. Nobody notices the air until it's moving. The same is true of the ether. People are like, well, what's the ether? What's a field? A field is really simple. A field is an ether perturbation modality. Get to talking about the ether in a second. I want to just go to it. The ether, of course, is just pure potential, non-Cartesian, counterspatial inertia. The essence, of course, of all field modalities. The attribute, of course, of the ether is what the ancient Greeks actually had a few different names for it. They called it the euristos dias. They too called it ananke, or necessity. And that's the attribute, the extrinsic attribute of the ether. And then, of course, you have to get into defining the extrinsic attribute of the one, or the transcendent agathon, which is the good and good, light and illumination, which, of course, are not two different things. And then you have to, unfortunately, define monism. All this is actually really simple, but it requires a completely different key or legend within your mind, which is a metaphysical legend, and that's like the next step. We're on like Padawan. I hate Star Wars references, but we're on like Padawan level of keys and legends as far as maps go. There's a different legend and a key for emanationism and specifically metaphysics, and that's not what this video is about. However, everything, of course, is one. Unification, of course, is the unification of both objective and subjective and transcendence. Light, of course, as Nikola Tesla said, is a longitudinal disturbance in the ether. He said light was a sound wave in the ether. Unfortunately, all of humanity suffers from the same mental defect, and they think that light is a wave and a wave-particle duality, and light has a speed, and all those things are untrue. Light is not an emission, but anytime someone hears speed, they think something is being emitted or traveling from point A to point B. We have the speed of sound, and everybody thinks sound is traveling. But when I'm talking, I'm not emitting anything. I'm actually, of course, creating a disturbance, kind of like waves in the water. Like you're in a pool and you're flapping your arms, you're creating waves in the little kiddie pool or a pond or whatever, creating a disturbance in the medium. I'm actually creating a disturbance in the medium, and of course the medium of sound, of course, is the air, oxygen and nitrogen. And the same is true of all fields. You're just energy, the release of energy specifically, is creating disturbances in the medium. This thing that we call magnetism is a dielectric field. Dielectricity, of course, is another field modality. Electricity is the hybrid of both of those things. Gravity is an anti-field. We can't throw a ball up in the air, which takes a few calories of energy, and say when the ball actually reaches its full energy dissipation, starts to fall back towards the earth, no one would stupidly say that was an anti-throw. Well, there's something different. You know, when you throw it up in the air, that would be magnetic. When it actually starts to fall back to Earth, we could say that, well, that's magnetic attraction, which of course does not exist at all. Or we could say, well, this is no more magnetic, it is gravitational. It's like, well, that's ridiculous. That's like saying a ball falling back to Earth is an anti-throw. But of course it's not. I like to simplify things in a very short period of time and just make it really, really simple. Everything this amazing yin and yang of the entire universe, this principle, attribute, the one and what the one does, and of course does is incorrect. What the good is and what the good does is also too called the good. So we have the good and the good. This is the reason why, by the way, the first two digits in the Fibonacci sequence are 1 and 1. It goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, so on and so forth. It's not a second one or an autonomous one or a copy of the first one. It's the extrinsic attribute of the first one, which is also 1. Light and illumination, good and the good. The yin and the yang of the entire universe. 1 and phi. 1, of course, everybody's kind of familiar with, even though they can't ideate it in their head since it's transcendent, and it is, of course, never objective. But everybody will talk about the golden ratio. Like, well, the golden ratio, what is it? And this is a perfect example. This is actually a mid-cut of a nautilus shell, and this, of course, follows the Fibonacci sequence. Well, this is beautiful. It's like, well, that's accurate. You've been descriptive, but you've not actually explained why it's beautiful. The reason why it is the most beautiful and the most harmonic is that it's an extrinsic multiplicative of the one. The Fibonacci sequence culminates in greater and greater objective pure harmony relative to the one itself. The reason why the Fibonacci sequence or the golden ratio is beauty itself is that it is a logos harmonic representation of the one. Kind of like a supermodel mother and a supermodel father having a bunch of little beautiful supermodel children. You know, it's like they're so beautiful, it's the most beautiful child, and grows up, of course, to be super, super beautiful. It's like, well, you know, you've taken two things and you made something additionally beautiful. That's kind of a crude representation, but the dielectric and the magnetic. I'm proud, even if I drop dead tomorrow and grab it back here without like hurting myself because it's so powerful it's actually dangerous. Oh, wait, there we go. This is powerful magnet. So, well, here's the north side of the magnet, here's the south side of the magnet. I'm like, well, that's true, but the only part that's actually magnetic is around here, the periphery. Right here is this black hole that you actually see underneath the supercell, but the magnetic flux is right here. This center part that's black underneath the supercell is not magnetism at all. Sure it is. Like, no, it's not. Human beings basically are like children. You go to the puppet show, you take little kids to the puppet show. They're fascinated by the puppets. Of course, nobody goes to puppet shows anymore where somebody's actually standing behind the, man, that's a powerful magnet. You You know, little kids looking at puppets, they're fascinated with the puppets, but they can't see the little puppet masters behind, you know, the box where they're actually animating the puppets. The human beings are the same way. We're fascinated by the magnetic field, which is analogous perfectly so to the puppets, but we can't see the puppet master, you know, the fundamental impetus, energy nexus that's actually driving the puppets, or in this case, the magnetic field. This is the conjugate geometry of the entire universe, the dielectric and the magnetic. Force and rest. People don't get rest. Everybody understands force. This isn't, of course, a real fire, but, you know, you're actually burning, you know, the rest energy within the cellulose of the wood, and you're heating yourself up, and, of course, it'll eventually, you know, exterminate itself out. People don't get rest. Force, of course, the fruition of force is always evil. This desire for feeding something, this is, of course, the evil that ultimately feeds off the one. The source for evil, nobody talks about this, including no silly religions, is that evil itself, just like, take the embodiment of the purest good and the embodiment of the purest evil, they both feed off the same thing. One, however, is perpetually burning it, you know, and of course it's very impressive, kind of like lighting up a huge pile of wood. You ever seen one of those gigantic, you know, 30-foot mountains of wood that are lit up like at the end of a soccer game or whatever? You know, it's a huge roaring fire. You know, it's feeding off of the wood, and of course there's the rest, the people that actually have the wood stored in the back for when it starts to get cold. Both force of evil and rest of the good or the one are feeding off the exact same thing. Shadow, of course, feeds off the light. The stronger the light, the stronger the shadow. But one thing people never talk about is that the shadow is not a thing. A shadow is an absence of something, and space is no different than a shadow. Fundamental fallacy of reification, of relativity and quantum, which are both the same thing, they're both atomistic nonsenses, is that they reify something that doesn't exist. It's like pointing to a really nice, and it's really hot outside, I'm going to stand in the shadow of this house, you feel cooler, you're happy that you think it's something. And it is something. You stand in a shadow, you feel cooler if it's like blazing hot outside. You park your car in the shade like I did today because it's like 1,000,000 degrees outside. You think it's something and you appreciate it, but it's not something at all. It's an absence of something. Humanity really does this. They think that light is a speed and it's moving, and it's not. They think sound is moving and it's something that's emitted just like light, and it's not. Same is true of shadows, the same is true of time. Wisdom, of course, is rest. Peace is rest. All power, of course, comes from rest. Power does not come from force. Force is the dissipation of rest, the dissipation of true power. Any desire, by the way, of course, for power leads to shadows and leads to evil, and this leads to one's own destruction. You know, just as if you were to cast yourself in the, you know, the lit pit here. Matter, we can move on to the other aspect of the legend of the map of the universe, is that matter is a super high energy light. All atoms are compounded hydrogen, which is 100% undeniable, but hydrogen is capacitance threshold light. Once capacitance threshold is met, then there's no longer propagation. That propagation, of course, is a disturbance in the medium. That propagation threshold is the speed limit, if you will, crude analogy, of the ether. The speed limit of the ether is what we call C. Once that capacitance threshold is met, we have matter, we have hydrogen. This is the reason why these, I don't care what people call them, the things that human beings call black holes are emitting out trillions and trillions of tons of hydrogen. They're called astrophysical jets or galactic jets. It doesn't make any difference. They're both references of the same thing. So matter is just capacitance threshold light. Light itself is just a compound field circuit. Specifically, it's a torsional energy helix. If I could actually get people to look at it in their head, which most people aren't capable of doing, looking at this repeating energy helix, which is all forms of light, it's nothing other than an incomplete remanifesting torus These little things that these foolish atomists call photons are energy rarefactions, energy compressions, excuse me. And the rarefactions manifest as the dissolution of that little compression, which manifests as this toroidal incomplete with a frequency, of course. And frequency is analogous to capacitance. To even understand light, you could actually say, if you really want to understand light, you'd have to understand that the smaller the space, the higher the capacitance. And the energy level of all EMR, electromagnetic radiation, is relative to its frequency. The higher the frequency, the higher the capacitance. But also, too, the smaller the spatial footprint. This is what I keep calling a coaxial circuit, but you could refer to it as a torsional energy helix, which is what light is. You drop a stone in the water, I don't know if you've ever seen it in high-speed videography. You'll actually see two things that are actually one thing. And if you actually repeat this ad infinitum at a set frequency, is exactly what we see in light. When you actually drop a little stone in calm waters, you'll actually see these transverse waves of the medium, which of course that case is the water. And you'll actually see this pinch point as the waves, that torsion that spreads, and of course everything is pressure mediation, that actually recoagulates, and coagulates not the most perfect word, but recoagulates in this perfect little drop. If everybody's seen that in high-speed videography of a stone or something dropped in the water, it'll actually pinch itself back and it'll make a little ball of water. Yeah. And if it's enough power on that one little plane, it'll actually even out again. The little ball of water will drop into the water, and it'll repinch itself again into another little ball of water. And this is what these foolish people of quantum and relativity are calling photons. There's no such thing as a photon. Every expert in field theory said there's no such thing as an electron. Every actual science, branch of science agrees that all free neutrons spontaneously become protons. You could go look that up. This means there's only one fundamental particle. All atoms are compounded hydrogen. There's only one fundamental particle, and so-called neutrons are a different phase modality of a proton, and there's no such thing as an electron. Tesla said that. J.J. Thomson, the discoverer of same. There's no such thing as an electron. It's completely ridiculous. It's easy to destroy these people on that too, by the way. They say, oh, if that's the case, then how does an electron microscope work? It's an electrostatic reflectance imager. Electrostatic reflectance imager. Electron microscope, I had the chance to buy a couple used ones that were probably broken. Had a lot of really expensive parts out there. Fundamentally a really simple device. Electrostatic reflectance imager. That doesn't give quantification to the idea of an electron. Anyway, that's a matter for another discussion. All life flourishes on the plane of inertia. People say, what's the plane of inertia? The flurfers love to run with that plane of inertia thing. They're purposefully misinterpreting what I'm actually saying, referring to the plane of inertia. The plane of inertia is the lowest field flux area of magnetic centrifugal flux and dielectric centripetal acceleration. Spiral arm galaxies, that is the plane of inertia. Even the people that I never agree with have it correct. So there's this huge magnetic torus around our galaxy and every other spiral arm galaxy. It's invisible, of course, but the galactic plane of our spiral arm galaxy, that's where basically nearly 100% of life and matter exists. It's the lowest pressure mediation between the centrifugal divergent magnetic and the centripetal convergent towards inertia and acceleration. Dielectric is. You can even see that on this magnet underneath the ferrocell. I've got some magnetic viewing film over there. I don't think it's within arm's length to reach, but it's right here. We got the centrifugal magnetic flux here, and on the other pole we have the centrifugal magnetic flux here. We have this anti-torsional, i.e. increasing inertia and acceleration at the midpoint here, and same as on the other side. But right here we see this bright white line. It extends around the midpoint between magnetic polarity and the center of the hyperboloid. The hyperboloid, of course, is just a fancy word of saying an hourglass shape. The plane of inertia would exist right here, right around this midpoint, this pinch point here. You see here in the middle where there's nothing at all. Of course, you can't take it literally on this specific analogy since there is a little hole there and sand pouring from one side to the other. Center of every spiral arm galaxy is just supermassive black hole, kind of like the center of your eye and the center of a spoke of a wheel. On the periphery we have light. Human beings don't understand light. They don't understand light at all. When people see light, they think that they're seeing light. They're not. They're seeing illumination. Just think about that for a second. I've got countless hundreds of videos underneath the supercell. Where's the light on the supercell, or even the magnetic viewing film? You know, that black spot in the middle of either quote-unquote pole of a magnet? What you're looking at there is actually rest. You're looking at light there. Well, no, I don't. I see the light around that black hole. No, what you're seeing there is the illumination. Human eyes, nobody on this planet has ever seen light. They only see illumination. This is where humanity always says everything upside down and backwards. That black spot in the center on the supercell, that's the light. Everywhere you actually think you see the light, you know, it's the light, the illumination passing into your eye because it has a set frequency or multiple frequencies, the visible illumination of the electromagnetic radiation. That's the magnetic. That's illumination. No, it's not. It's light. I can see it right there. It's lit. Yeah, but you got it backwards. The light's in the center. The periphery is the illumination. Anyway, all life flourishes on the plane of inertia. This is the dielectric centripetal acceleration of the black spot and the centrifugal constructive interference of the magnetic on the outside. Phi, by the way, and getting back to the golden ratio, is a perfect proportionality between the one and its attribute in extension. Perfect ratio harmonic manifestation that we call beauty is a multiplicative of the one. The one in extension that's in perfect harmonic ratio proportionality to the one is that which we call the beautiful, or phi. The golden ratio. Why is it golden? Why is it beautiful? I don't know, it's just beautiful. Like, well, at least people admit that they don't know. There's two different types of lives, getting on to this last couple of points here. Of course, there's a life of contemplation and ascension, and the other life of action. There's no actions that lead to transcendence. There's no actions that lead to wisdom. You could actually stick all of this stuff in a nutshell. This idea of this long ascetic life and multiple lifetimes to come to fruition of transcendence is absolute bunk. The original hardcore metaphysics of Gautama, Plotinus, Numenius, Cydianus, Pythagorean, very, very simple. By the way, the Four Noble Truths that everybody thinks is original Buddhism is not original at all. It's super ancient, far more ancient than that. It's this doctor's fourfold motto of suffering. You identify someone suffering. Then you have the disease that's the source of that suffering. Number 3, you have the diagnosis. Well, this is the causation for this. And number 4, of course, is the application of the cure. So it's suffering, disease, diagnosis, cure. I've been debating that topic for decades, been translating ancient Pali now for decades. These people don't know anything. I will quote Dr. Anandakita Kumaraswamy, who famously said that Buddhism is famous for everything it originally never taught. Very wise words. This is a reason why I have no interest at all in religion, which is secularized metaphysics. Everything is just simplex spiritual perturbation, which of course is embodiment. Rest via wisdom, of course, is transcendence. Every passage agrees with this. Logic, wisdom agrees with it. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha, bhav nirodhana bandham. The subjugation or cutting off of that which modulates the spirit and, of course, is the cause of embodiment. What we should do in life, and I wished I was taught this younger in life, but I realized it very early on, thankfully, is that we should shun fools. There's an ancient passage that says, better to travel alone than with a fool for company. We should shun fools. We should shun those who want power, shun them entirely. We should shun evil materialists. We should embrace wisdom, and we should embrace natural order, but most of us don't do that because we're not taught that that is what is most noble in life. We're taught to make as much money as possible, get as much stuff as possible, like he who dies with the most toys wins. Lastly, really, well, almost lastly, is that space and time are unreal. These people that have told us everything real is unreal and everything that's unreal is real. Space is no different than a shadow. A shadow is not a thing. Time, of course, is only a measure, and a measure is not a thing. An inch, a mile, a meter, a gram, an ounce, a liter, a gallon. These are not things. These are agreed upon measures. This means everything is either mind, light, or matter, and all of that, of course, is reducible to an ether modality disturbance, a perturbation, whether it be of spirit or whether it be of matter, which, of course, has a frequency. What is the opposite of rest and transcendence? People don't get rest and transcendence. They get force and energy, but not energy, rather the release of energy. Well, the opposite of rest and transcendence is the average human life, which is desire, disturbance, fear, anger, on and on and on, which is just a modulation or a disturbance of spirit. You could say of mind, or you could say of nous or chitta. There are countless different words in Greek, Latin, Pali, Sanskrit, but they all refer to one and the same thing. I'm not talking about consciousness, I'm talking about the transcendent mind, which is ab extra to the psychophysical persona non grata. Negative dialectic, or apophaticism, of course, is a move towards rest, i.e. return. The entirety of this cosmos, from one end to the other, top to bottom, can be put into a legend, kind of like those old paper maps that had a key or a legend in the bottom corner. So you knew what the squiggly lines meant and what the red blocks meant versus the black blocks, so on and so forth. It's all really simple, and by applying this key or a legend is a shortcut to having a better life, seeing through everything for what it is, how it is, why it is. When someone actually has the true physics and metaphysics, i.e. the key and the legend of this universe within their head, they can literally see through everything in their life. The good, the bad, the ugly. It all becomes abundantly clear. It's like, I know what that is, and I know why it's acting that way. I know what it wants. Isn't life supposed to be easier? Life is not about filling your head full of a mountain of useless facts, which is what our so-called education system does. Anyway, I hope you like these videos. You ever want to contact me, I've got a bunch of free downloaded articles that I've written. It's in the link below. Also, too, any donation is always warmly welcome. I hope you have a lovely week. And this is Unification. You can't stick all of that in a 20-minute video or however long this was. I'd like to see anybody else try to unify all that stuff as simply as I did. And it is all really simple. You just open up your eyes and flush the garbage out of your head and see it clearly for what it is and how it is. Like, yeah, total sense. Thanks.